Carl Jung never said that people are unnecessary. He never argued for isolation, for contempt, for the abandonment of human connection. What he described across decades of clinical observation and theoretical work was something more precise and far more disturbing to most readers: that the need for other people, in its most common form, is not connection. It is dependency disguised as connection. And dependency, in Jung's framework, is what happens to a person who has not yet met the parts of themselves they have spent a lifetime avoiding. The statement is not about the value of relationships. It is about the function relationships serve for a psyche that has not done its own work. The less you need people in this framework is not a description of becoming isolated. It is a description of becoming complete enough that connection, when it happens, is no longer a transaction conducted to fill an absence. This script exists to explain exactly what that absence is, why almost no one closes it, and what changes a euro structurally, irreversibly a euro in a person who does. Chapter 1. What the shadow actually is. Before any of this can be understood, the term shadow has to be defined with precision, because it has been diluted by decades of casual misuse into something vague and mystical. In Jung's actual framework, the shadow is the totality of everything in your psyche that your conscious identity has rejected. Not repressed in the dramatic sense of trauma alone, but rejected in the ordinary sense of every trait, impulse, and capacity that did not fit the self-image you were constructing as you grew. If you were raised to believe that anger was dangerous, your capacity for anger went into the shadow. If you were raised to believe that ambition was selfish, your capacity for ambition went into the shadow. If you were raised to believe that needing things from other people was weak, your actual neediness a euro, which exists in everyone, because dependency is a biological fact of early development, it went into the shadow. The shadow is not a separate entity. It is not a demon, not an alternate personality, not a metaphor for evil. It is simply the unacknowledged remainder of a complete human being, set aside because the conscious mind decided, usually for reasons it cannot remember, that this remainder was unacceptable. The shadow does not vanish when it is set aside. It operates from the unconscious, influencing behavior, mood, and choice in ways the conscious mind cannot trace back to their source, which is precisely what makes the shadow dangerous to the person who refuses to meet. Chapter 2. The function of other people in an unintegrated psyche. Here is the uncomfortable mechanism at the center of this entire discussion. A person who has not integrated their shadow experiences a persistent, low-grade sense of incompleteness, a feeling that something is missing, that they're not quite whole, that there's a part of themselves they cannot locate or articulate. This feeling is accurate. Something is missing. The shadow material has been disowned, and its absence is felt even when its content cannot be named. The unintegrated psyche, unable to resolve this absence internally, looks outward. Other people become the mechanism by which the missing material is approached without being directly confronted. You are drawn to people who express the traits you have suppressed in yourself, the partner who is unapologetically selfish when you cannot claim your own needs, the friend who is openly aggressive when you cannot access your own anger, the colleague whose ambition disgusts and fascinates you in equal measure, because it represents a hunger you have exiled. This is projection, but it operates in both directions. You project your shadow onto others when you see it and condemn it. And you orbit others, sometimes for years, because they are carrying a externally, visibly, often dramatically, material that belongs in fragments to you. The relationship feels necessary because it is performing a psychological function. It is giving you contact, however indirect, with parts of yourself you cannot otherwise access. This is why some relationships feel inexplicably essential despite being unsatisfying. The satisfaction was never the point. The contact with the disowned self was. Chapter 3. Why this looks like love but functions like dependency. The mechanism described in the previous chapter rarely announces itself as what it is. It is experienced from the inside as love, as chemistry, as a connection that feels more significant than ordinary compatibility would explain. This is one of the more unsettling implications of Jung's framework. A substantial portion of what people experience as profound romantic or platonic connection is actually the psyche's recognition of shadow material it has been seeking, consciously or not, for years. The intensity of the attraction is proportional to the size of the disowned material being addressed, not to the actual compatibility between the two people involved. This explains a pattern that almost everyone has either lived through or witnessed. The relationship that feels like destiny and functions like a slow catastrophe. The two people are not actually well-matched. They are shadow-matched, each one carrying, in externalized form, what the other has refused to carry internally. The relationship persists, often well past the point where its costs exceed its benefits, because ending it does not feel like losing a person. It feels like losing access to a part of yourself, because functionally, that is exactly what it is. This is dependency. It is not a character flaw. It is a structural consequence of incompleteness, and it operates with or without the person's consent or awareness, which is precisely why Jung considered shadow integration not a luxury for the psychologically curious, but a requirement for anyone who wants their relationships to be something other than unconscious transactions. Chapter 4: The first encounter with the shadow. Meeting the shadow is not a single event, and it rarely happens by deliberate choice. It is usually forced by a crisis, a loss, a failure, a moment in which the performed self collapses under pressure it cannot withstand, and something else, something unrehearsed, comes through in its place. You have likely experienced fragments of this already, even if you did not recognize them for what they were. The rage that emerged disproportionate to its trigger. The desire you could not justify, but could not dismiss. The moment of cruelty towards someone you loved, executed with a precision that disturbed you afterward, because it revealed a capacity for harm you had not known you possessed. These are not aberrations. They are the shadow breaking through the containment the conscious personality has built around it. Usually at the exact moment that containment is weakest, under exhaustion, under threat, under the specific pressure that the conscious personality was never designed to withstand because it was built to manage ordinary circumstances, not extreme ones. The first encounter is almost always experienced as shame. You did not recognize yourself. You behaved in a way that contradicted the identity you had spent years constructing. The instinct at this point is to disown the behavior immediately, to treat it as an aberration, apologize for it, and rebuild the wall that the shadow briefly breached. This instinct is precisely backward. The aberration was not the behavior. The aberration was the years of performance that preceded it. Chapter 5: The choice after the breach. What happens after the first significant encounter with the shadow determines almost everything about a person's subsequent psychological trajectory. There are broadly two paths. The first path is reinforcement. The person disturbed by what they glimpsed redoubles their commitment to the performed identity. They become more controlled, more vigilant, more determined to ensure that the breach does not recur. This path feels like discipline and is experienced by everyone around the person as an improvement. It is, in fact, a deepening of the original problem. The shadow material has not been addressed. It has been more forcefully suppressed, which means the eventual pressure required to contain it increases, and the eventual breach, because there is always an eventual breach, it will be more severe than the one that prompted the recommitment. The second path is engagement. The person, however reluctantly, allows themselves to examine what the breach revealed without immediately disowning. They ask, instead of how do I prevent this from happening again, the much harder question, what does this tell me about what I have been refusing to be? This question does not have a comfortable answer. It requires acknowledging capacities, for anger, for selfishness, for desire, for cruelty, that the constructed identity was specifically built to deny. Almost no one chooses this path voluntarily. It is chosen when it is chosen, because the alternative has become unbearable, because the cost of continued suppression has finally exceeded the cost of confrontation. Chapter 6: The gradual withdrawal of projected need. As shadow integration proceeds, and it proceeds slowly, in increments, through repeated cycles of breach and examination rather than a single transformative event, something measurable begins to change in a person's relational life. The intense, almost compulsory pull towards certain types of people begins to diminish. This is not because the person becomes incapable of attraction or connection. It is because the specific mechanism driving certain attractions, the unconscious search for externalized shadow material, it has less material left to search for. The person who has reclaimed their own capacity for aggression no longer requires a partner who expresses aggression on their behalf. The person who has acknowledged their own ambition no longer needs to live vicariously through someone else's hunger. The person who has confronted their own capacity for selfishness no longer requires a relationship that performs selfishness so they can experience the relief of moral contrast. What remains after this withdrawal is a significantly smaller field of people who feel necessary. This is often experienced initially as a loss, a kind of relational flattening, as if the intensity that characterized earlier connections has gone out of the world. It has not gone out of the world. It has gone back inside, to the place it was generated from the beginning. The people who remain compelling are no longer compelling because they carry your shadow. They are compelling, if they are compelling at all, for reasons that have nothing to do with what you lack. Chapter 7, What less need actually means in practice. This requires careful definition because the phrase invites a misreading that produces either grandiosity or coldness, and neither is accurate. Needing less does not mean caring less. It does not mean becoming incapable of grief, of attachment, of the ordinary human experience of missing someone or being changed by their presence. What it means, specifically, is that the psychological function previously performed by other people, the provision of contact with disowned parts of the self, is no longer required, because that contact is now available internally. This produces a series of concrete behavioral changes. You no longer require a partner to validate aspects of your identity that you have learned to validate yourself. You no longer require a friend to express the anger you cannot access, because you have access to your own. You no longer require a community to provide a sense of belonging that compensates for an internal sense of fragmentation. Fragmentation has been substantially repaired. The relationships that remain are not weaker for this. They are, in a specific and measurable sense, cleaner. They're not loaded with the unconscious freight of unmet psychological need, which means the other person can be related to as they actually are, rather than as a vessel for a function you require them to perform. This is, paradoxically, what makes deep connection possible for the first time. You cannot fully see another person while you're using them to access yourself. Chapter 8, The loneliness that is not loneliness. There's a phase in this process, often extended, that feels like loneliness but is not loneliness in the conventional sense. As the unconscious pull toward shadow-carrying others diminishes, and before the person has fully stabilized into the more autonomous configuration that follows complete integration, there's a gap. The old mechanism for generating connection and intensity has been substantially dismantled. The new capacity for connection based on genuine compatibility rather than unconscious need has not yet been fully developed or trusted. In this gap, the person often experiences a kind of social flatness. Interactions that used to generate intensity now generate very little, and the person has not yet learned to locate or value the quieter, less dramatic forms of connection that are available to a more integrated psyche. This phase is frequently misdiagnosed by the person experiencing it and by everyone around them as depression, as withdrawal, as a problem to be corrected by reintroducing the old pattern of intense, need-driven connection. This diagnosis is usually wrong. What is actually happening is a recalibration. The nervous system, accustomed to the specific intensity that unconscious shadow projection generates, has not yet adjusted to the lower amplitude, higher fidelity signal that authentic connection produces. The temptation in this phase is to interpret the absence of old intensity as the absence of all connection, and to seek out a new source of dramatic, need-driven intensity to fill the gap. Resisting this temptation and tolerating the flatness long enough for the new capacity to develop is one of the more demanding requirements of the entire process. Chapter 9, The specific danger of mistaking this for superiority. As the process advances, there is a particular failure mode that deserves direct address because it is common and because it represents a subtle but complete derailment of the integration process. The person who has done significant shadow work, who has reclaimed substantial portions of their disowned self, who has reduced their dependency on others for psychological completion, this person can mistake their reduced need for superiority. They can begin to view the people who still operate through intense, need-driven attachment as lesser, as unevolved, as trapped in a pattern the integrated person has transcended. This is not integration. It is a relocation of the shadow, rather than its resolution. The contempt for other people's dependency is, in almost every case, a disowned form of the person's own remaining dependency, a projected outward onto others as a way of denying that it persists internally. Genuine shadow integration does not produce contempt for people who have not done the same work. It produces something closer to clear-eyed compassion, because the integrated person understands with precision exactly what the unintegrated person is experiencing, having experienced it themselves, and having done the difficult work of seeing it clearly rather than judging it from a position of assumed superiority. If you find that your reduced need for others has produced a sense of having transcended the people around you, this is not evidence of completion. It is evidence that the shadow has found a new disguise and the work is not finished. Chapter 10, the relationships that survive integration. Not every relationship dissolves when shadow integration removes its unconscious foundation. Some relationships, once the projection and the compulsive need are stripped away, reveal something underneath that was always there, but was previously obscured by the noise of the unconscious mechanism. These are the relationships built, even partially, on something other than mutual shadow carrying, a genuine compatibility, shared values that were chosen rather than projected, an enjoyment of the other person's actual qualities rather than the function they were unconsciously performing. These relationships often change in texture after integration. They become quieter. The intensity that characterized them is reduced because intensity in unintegrated relational dynamics is frequently a symptom of unmet need rather than a marker of quality. What replaces the intensity is something with a different kind of weight, a connection that does not require constant maintenance, constant management, constant negotiation of unspoken needs, because the needs that were previously unspoken and unconscious have been substantially addressed elsewhere, internally, by the person who used to require the relationship to address them. The people who remain after this process are frequently surprised by how little drama survives the transition. This is not because the relationship has become less significant. It is because significance, properly understood, never required drama in the first place. Drama was a symptom of the dependency. Its absence is a sign of the dependency's resolution, not a sign that something valuable has been lost. Chapter 11, the final configuration Jung was describing. What Jung was pointing toward in the statement that gives this video its title is a specific psychological configuration that is rare, demanding, and frequently lonely in ways that have nothing to do with isolation. It is the configuration of a person who no longer requires the social field to complete them, because the completion has happened or is continuously happening internally. This person still values connection. They still form attachments, still experience love, still feel the loss of people who matter to them. What has changed is the function connection serves. It is no longer compensatory. It is no longer the mechanism by which an internal absence is managed through external supply. It has become, instead, something closer to addition rather than completion. A person who is already whole, encountering another person who is also whole, and choosing to share something neither of them strictly requires. This is a fundamentally different basis for relationship than the one most people operate from, and it produces a fundamentally different experience of other people. You stop scanning for what someone can provide that you lack. You start noticing what someone actually is, independent of your own unmet needs. This shift, small as it sounds, restructures every relationship it touches. And it is only available to a person who has done the specific, uncomfortable work of meeting the parts of themselves they spent a lifetime sending other people to find. Closing the cold arithmetic of completion. Here is the arithmetic stated without comfort. Every person you have ever needed too much, every connection that felt more vital than the relationship's actual content could explain, every absence that left you destabilized in a way that seemed disproportionate to what was actually lost a euro. These were not failures of love. They were transactions conducted by an incomplete psyche, using other people as a substitute for work it had not yet done on itself. This is not a flattering account of human connection, and it is not meant to be. It is also not an argument against connection. It is an argument against unconscious connection, against relationships and communities and social. structures that function primarily as outsourced psychological infrastructure for people who have not built their own. The less you need people, in Jung's formulation, is not a description of becoming alone. It is a description of becoming sufficient enough that the people who remain in your life are there by choice rather than necessity, valued for what they are rather than what they compensate for. This sufficiency is not granted. It is built slowly through the specific and largely solitary work of meeting what you have spent your life avoiding. Most people will not do this work. Most relationships will continue to operate as unconscious transactions between people who have outsourced their own completion to each other. This is not a judgment. It is simply the most common configuration there is. What you do with that information, now that you have it, is no longer something this video can determine for you.